Okay, we're holding today Samachay Aleph 65. That is right after the Mishnah. We did the Mishnah about cutting the grain for the Omer. And now we start the Tan Rabbanan. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And in the course of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Okay, Tan Rabbanan. Start in the Brisa. Elaine. Reb Naftali, I got a Megillas Tainus from you, I think. You had a Megillas Tainus, and you gave it to me.
I did?
Yeah.
Is it good?
This is a quote from Megillas Tainus. Elaine Yemaya Dleila Sanabahin. Following days are days that we don't fast. They're considered these minor holidays that took place during the temple times, second temple times. And we don't fast during those days. And some of them are so holy, are so holiday-ish that we don't eulogize either. Can't we fast? We don't eulogize either. Because if someone passes away, we don't make the eulogy on that day because it would be sad. And these are holidays, so we don't mention any sadness. What are these days? From Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the 8th day, he took him to Mida D'Leila Mispid. It was established the Karban Tamid, and we don't do a hesped in these days either. I didn't see in the Gemara where it says, or it explains this. What do they say? Oh yeah, it does. The Gemara says, I'm so sorry. The Gemara says very clear. That's the Gemara is going to start off with explaining this. Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see it. We'll see in a moment. There was a problem. There was a conflict about who is allowed to bring the Karban Tamid. Then the next case is from the 8th day until after Pesach. Until after Shavuos, until after Pesach, it was established the holiday of Shavuos. Yeah, so we have from 8 till after Pesach was also a conflict on what day Shavuos is supposed to be, and so because we were victorious over the first one, over who brings the Karban Tamid, we're victorious over the second one, over when Shavuos is. Those are two conflicts we had with other groups. So we have a holiday here, and this one says D'Leila Mispid also. Rashi's gear says different. Rashi's gear says that it's not D'Leila Mispid, it's D'Leila Sana. On the second one, we just don't fast. Okay. Let's take a look. The Gemara explains. What is the Gemara saying? What was the Megillas Tainus saying when it says from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the 8th day, the Tamid was established, and therefore we're not going to eulogize on these days. It's considered an 8-day holiday. It says the Tzaddikim would say Yachin Misnadav maybe Tamid, that an individual is allowed to bring a Karban Tamid. In other words, we bring a Karban Tamid as a community offering. They said, no, we could sponsor a day, and individuals can come bring their Karban Tamid. Those 8 days they were discussing, it was a big debate for 8 days. Case. Yeah. So, in other words, not that an individual would bring his own tamid, but an individual could sponsor the tamid for the temple. We do it that is community that comes from the Maseches Shekel, right? They held that you didn't have to be Maseches Shekel. You just sponsor a day, pick a day you want to, and it will be your day for the Karban Tamid. My Derush. Where did they get this from? They said, as a kevasa chad tasa v'beiker, as a kevasa shini tasa bein arbayim. So they took a look at the word tasa. That's the shirish is aleph, sin, hey, and you put a taf at the beginning. So future tense, um, second person singular, right? You. Second person masculine singular. Third person feminine singular, right? Tasa. Yeah, Reb Naftali, you with me on that? Remember the joke with Lakewood? They said Hashem was giving the Torah, so he was offering it to the different nations. So they said, "What does it say in the Torah?" This one said, "Oh, don't kill, don't steal, whatever." Anyway, he came to Lakewood. He said, "What does it say in the Torah?" It says Sheishis Yamim Tavid. She worked 6 days. They said, "Forget it." So Hashem says, "No, you didn't learn diktuk. Tavid, she should work." So it turns out is that the tough at the beginning of a word could be a singular second person, that means you, or it could mean also a third person feminine, she. I mean, it depends on the context. Whatever the case is, it says over here, you should. It says a singular. This is a lamb in the morning and a lamb in the afternoon. The second lamb in the afternoon. You should bring. You should perform. It's a singular. That means an individual can donate. So Maya Hadru. So what was the response of the Chachavim? You take a look at the word. It says tishmeru. That's a tough at the beginning of a word and a vav at the end. That becomes a plural. That's a second person masculine plural, as opposed to tishmarna would be a feminine plural. But so tishmeru is a plural, which means it's a community sacrifice. Okay. That it comes from the Chumas Alishka. So there's a difference in the words here. Sometimes you have what's called the collective singular. I think when you talk about the nation and you say it in singular, because it's all one nation. So the Tishmar, Tasa, I mean that the whole nation. But anyway, they didn't respond to that. They said Tishmaru, that there's another word that says plural. Okay, so that was the discussion regarding. It took 8 days to have that discussion. That was a discussion about the carbon tamid, and that was with the tzedukim. From the 8th until after Pesach was established, the holiday of Shavuos. Over there, we don't fast or we don't eulogize. So the Baitusim, which I'm not sure exactly the difference between in philosophy between the Tzedukim and the Baitusim. There were two students of Antigna Shesecha, right? Tzadok and Baitas. Whatever the case is, I'm sure the scholars have it worked out, but each one holds. Whatever the case is, they said that Atzeres Achar Shabbos, that Shavuos has to be on a Sunday. Okay, Nitbalem Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai approaches them and he says to them, Shaitim, it says, fools, minayin lachem. Where did you get this from that Shavuos has to be on a Sunday? There was no one there that knew the answer, that could respond. There was one zaken. Mefatvit sounds like he was uttering. That sounds like he was like stuttering, sort of. But yeah. How do they translate it over there? What was the old man doing? Oh, they translate it as taunted. Uh-huh. Mefatvit sounds more like chirping. And he connected with Amar, and he was saying, it sounds like he didn't have it. He didn't have it together. He was just like, saying random things. It says Moshe Rabbeinu Ohev Yisrael. Paddling?
No, prattling.
Prattling. In the language, they say this word is elongated version of patet. Apparently, this is an poetic term as it originates by mimicking the sound of ducks and quacking. Put put. Put put is onomatopoeia. Like bakbuk. Remember that? They told you that in school? That when you pour a bakbuk, because when you pour, it goes buck, 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 buck as you're pouring. So put put is the onomatopoeia also. Right? Like ouch. So what does he say? He says, Moshe Rabbeinu, Oyev Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu, he loved the Jewish people. And he knows that Shavuos is only one day. So Amad B'tiknach HaShabbos K'dish Yisrael Mesangim Shnei Yomim. Moshe Rabbeinu, he loved the Jewish people. He didn't want them to have just a one-day holiday. He wanted to have a long weekend. So he added another day to it so that they should be able to celebrate better. A two-day holiday apparently is better than a one-day holiday. So that's why he says that was his response on why Shavuos was going to be on a Sunday. Yeah. So Kara Alav Mikra Zeh Achadas Yoim Mecharev Derech Harseya. Rabbi Yechim Zaka responds, says that you have to add in to the Tzedukim's thing. You have to add in that Moshe Rabbeinu instituted this, that they should have a long weekend. And this is the Tzedukim's claim why Shavuos is on a Sunday. You don't want them to have just a random day in the middle of the week. You want them to have a longer weekend. And Hashem agreed to that. You have to add that in, that Hashem agreed. Right? And that was part of their claim. So Rabbi Yechim Zake says back, what he's saying, he loves the Jewish people. And so why did it take him 40 years in the desert? It says it was only an 11-day walk from Chayre, from Derech Harseir, from Mount Sinai, all the way till Kadesh Barnea. They could the whole trip in the desert instead of 40 years could have taken 11 days. If Moshe Rabbeinu were on top of 65b, Moshe Rabbeinu was such a Oyev Yisrael. Why did he? If he loved the Jews, why did he keep them in the desert? He delayed them for 40 years. Amalai. So the elders said to him, Rabbi, that's what the answer that you're going to give me. For whatever reason, they had to stay in the desert 40 years, but he still wanted to have a longer holiday. And that's not an answer. Amalai, Rabbi Chamzaki says, Shaitav, Leitei Torah Shlema Shalanu Kasicha B'Tel Shalachem. Our complete Torah shouldn't be like your idle chatter. I don't have to give you an answer. I'll tell you what the pshat is. One pasuk says, Tisbru Chamishim Yaim. You should count 50 days. And 50 days means that it's not associated with the weeks. Another one says you count 7 weeks. Okay, so what are you doing? Are you counting days or are you counting weeks? It says, Kan b'yom tov shcholias b'Shabbos, Kan b'yom tov shcholias b'emtz Shabbos. Depends. If Pesach fell on Shabbos, then you count the day after Pesach, then you would be counting from Sunday, then you'd be counting weeks. But if it fell in the middle of the week, then you're counting days. It's not a full week. So it depends. Depends when Pesach falls out. Pesach can fall on Shabbos. So, and then of course it could. But if it comes out that it's on a Sunday, the second day of Pesach, day after the first day of Pesach, then it would be a full week. Okay. I'm not going to have a long Gemara of other responses that the sages have to the Baitusim's claim that Shavuos has to be on a Sunday. Yeah? Each one's going to give his answer. We have even a mnemonic here that says, Shel Rabbi Lazar Sefer, Rabbi Shua Maina, Rabbi Shmuel Ma'amer, Rabbi Huda Lamata Simon. That's the mnemonic for each one of their answers. And then we're going to have another Bryce that's going to give us more answers. But some of them are going to overlap. Okay, the first one is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was a student of Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai's teretz to the Baitusim was that that I have two verses. One verse says you count weeks. One verse says you count days. The one that says you count days means that if Shavuos falls in the middle of the week, if Pesach falls in the middle of the week, then you're counting days. You're not starting from the beginning of the week. That's his answer. Rabbi Lezer says, "Ein tzarich." I don't need that answer. I have a better answer. It says you should count. Sfira tluya bebezdin. Shem yoidim lechadesh mimachras haShabbos mimachras Yom Tov. Yotze Shabbos Bereishis Sfira b'chol adam. It says because it says you will count. That means that it's something that the Bezdin has to count. Interesting. We hear lach, which is a singular, second person singular, right? You, it doesn't say lachem. Whatever the case is, it says you will count them. It's referring to the Bezdin. That's what he's learning it. So what does the Bezdin calculate? The Bezdin calculates the months. It doesn't calculate the days of the week. That we don't need the Bezdin to count. We don't need the Bezdin to tell us what day is Sunday, what day is Shabbos. That everyone knows what day is Sunday. Bezdin counts the months, which day is going to be Rosh Chodesh. So it's because it says Tisper Lach, so we have to be counting something that's dependent in Bezdin. We're counting the Omer, counting the 50 days, but that's something that's dependent in Bezdin, which means that when it says Mimachras Shabbos, the day after Shabbos, it means the day after Yom Tov. Because Shabbos is not something that the Bezdin needs to calculate. The Bezdin only needs to calculate Yom Tov. Counted from leaving Egypt till Mount Sinai. It was 49 days, right? Yeah, that ended there. So anyway, let's see. That's another teretz for Rabbi Lezer. It says that it has to be dependent on Bezdin. Rabbi Shua Aimer, Rabbi Shua is also a student of Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai. He says, Amra Torah Minei Yamim B'Kadosh Chodesh. It says calculate days and consecrate the month. Minei Yamim B'Kadosh Atzeres. Count days and consecrate Shavuos. Ma Chodesh Samach L'Biyasi Nikar. Just like when it comes to calculating the month, we know when the month begins because you see the moon. Afatzeres Samach L'Biyasi Nikares. Also Shavuos, you know when it's going to be because you calculate it based on when it starts. If you would say that Shavuos is always going to be on a Sunday, then how do you know which day it's going to be? You can't see. In other words, you could see from the moon what day is going to be the 6th of Sivan, right? It's like halfway between between nothing and a full moon, right? The full moon would be the 15th. So this is on the 6th. So a little under half. So you could see that from the moon. But if you have to depend on Sunday, then it's going to throw it off by a few days. You won't be able to tell what day Shavuos is. So as a comparison to Chodesh, to calculating the month, so we know what it looks like when we have a new month, right? We know what that looks like in the moon. So too, we know what Shavuos looks like, as long as you don't mix in the Sunday part. Okay, so that's Rabbi Shua's answer. Right. So it's going to be 7 weeks from the Omer. Right. So far, we have 3 answers. Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai says that the counting of the days, as opposed to the weeks. Rabbi Lezer says it has to be dependent on Bezdin, and Rabbi Shua that it has to be apparent in the sky what day it is. Rabbi Shmuel says, the Torah says that you bring the Omer, this grain offering, barley offering, on Pesach, and you bring the 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos. Malal on Regel Utchilas Regel, just like the Omer is brought on the beginning of the holiday. So to Afkan, also when it comes to well, rather, just like you have to do it the other way. Just like the Shtei Alechem is brought at the beginning of the holiday, because there is only a beginning. Afkan regel tchilas regel. Also, when it comes to Pesach, it's the beginning of the holiday. If you would have to wait till after Shabbos till a Sunday, then it may not be the beginning of the holiday. It could be sometime in the middle. Now we have Rabbi Shmuel, yeah? So we have Rabbi Yechim Zakai, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Shmuel. Now we have Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Some say it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira, but Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Eimer. Nemar Shabbos Lamayla v'Nemar Shabbos Lamatam. And it starts off saying you should count from after Shabbos. And it also says Shabbos Lamata. It says until the day after Shabbos you should count 50 days. And then you should bring the new grain, the new wheat, the Shtei Alechem. Malahalan, just like then, it's regular Tchilas Regel, Samachla. Just like the Shabbos at the end is the beginning of the holiday. Afkan, regular Tchilas Regel, Samachla. Also, when it comes to the Omer, it's the beginning of the holiday. So it's very similar to Rabbi Shmuel. This was a law that was only said after we had it was only taught the first time it was taught. It was only taught after the Torah was given. It wasn't, yeah. Pesach offering. Now we're talking about the Omer. It was only when we after the Torah was given, it was taught us that we do it in Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't done in the desert. Yeah. Tanarabanan. Taught in a brisa. We're going to get some other answers now. Some of them overlap the first. How many? The first six, right? Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. So it's five. Okay. So Svartim Lachem says that you should count. Oh, interesting. Lachem, as opposed to Lach, Tisper Lach. We said Tisper Lach meant the Bezdin. Now Lachem means that you all should count. Plural, the plural you, right? Like the Old English you. It was plural. Sheteh as opposed to thou. Sheteh Sfir l'chalechad v'echad, that every person is supposed to count individually. Mimachas Shabbos, mimachas Yom Tov. Says when do you count? The day after Shabbos, which means the day after Yom Tov. Maybe it means not the day after Yom Tov. Maybe it means the day after Shabbos. Shabbos Bereshis doesn't mean Shabbos Bereshis like that we have. Shabbos Bereshis means the Shabbos of the creation, which means the Saturday. It's called Shabbos Bereshis, not like the kiddush that we make after Simchas Torah. Shabbos Bereshis. It's a general term for any Saturday, any Shabbos. It's called Shabbos Bereshis, as opposed to Shabbos, which means Yom Tov. Yeah. Maybe it means Sunday, right? Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, says you should count 50 days. All the counting should only be 50 days. And if you would say, you'd say that it's the day after it's the day after Shabbos, which means on a Sunday, depending on what day Pesach would be. We'll go backwards now. Go back. Pesach is on a Shabbos, then it was going to be 50 days. Right? Because on Sunday you start counting, and Shavuos will be on a Sunday. But let's say you can only start counting from Sunday, but Pesach wasn't on Shabbos. Pesach was on Friday. Then it's not 50 days, it's 51 days. Pesach on a Thursday, 52 days. Pesach on a Wednesday, 53 days. Pesach on a Tuesday, 54 days. Pesach on a Monday, it's 55 days. How do you have 56 days? Something's wrong there. If it falls on a Bechad b'Shabbos, it falls on a Sunday. Yeah, that's that's right. Falls on a Sunday, it would be 56 days, right? Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, so that's a new answer here, right? We didn't have that before, did we? We didn't have this answer from Rabbi Yehuda that we need 50 days specifically. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira mein tzarach. I don't need that answer that Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda said. I have a new answer. It says, this sounds familiar. It says that you should count spheritally bebezdin. This is a sphere that's dependent on the court. Yatz Shabbos Beis says when it comes to Sundays or Shabbos, a regular Shabbos, that everyone counts. That's not up to the bezdin. This teretz we already had before from Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira in the Brisa is the same as Rabbi Eliezer in the first Brisa. Okay, Rabbi Yossi Aimer. Yossi says, "Mimachras Shabbos, Mimachras Yom Tov." It says the day after Shabbos. That means Yom Tov, the day after Yom Tov. Atzay Mimachras Yom Tov and Mimachras Shabbos Breishis. We just turned the page on 66. By the way, if you want to remember what the after says, Samachay is Sfira Saimer. All right, it's a simon. Samachay Sfira Saimer. So it's a way to remember. Like the Gemara Shabbos about Lag Baimer is on Daf Lamed Gimel. So here you have Menachos Samachay. Anyway, it turns to Samach Vav also. Route 66. Maybe it means the day after Shabbos. Maybe it means Sunday. Amrit v'chinemer machzor Shabbos shebetecha Pesach. Alei nemer machzor Shabbos to kol shana kulam alei Shabbos. Say b'dekei Shabbos. Gives an interesting teretz. He says if it means the day after, if it means a Sunday, and it doesn't mean Pesach, then which Sunday are you referring to? You have 52 of those in the year. If it doesn't mean Pesach, what is it? Which one do you start counting from? Anyone? What does that have to do with Pesach? If Shabbos doesn't mean Yom Tov, so then how do you know? You just count the day after Shabbos. It means you have an option. Any Shabbos of the year, you're going to start counting 50 days. Doesn't say anything about Pesach. No. No. We're counting from Pesach, the day after Pesach, because that's what we hold. But it says how many days do you count? 50 days. They associated with 50 days on the Sunday in Pesach. They said 1 second, but it's not really 50 days. It could be really 56 days. Pesach was on the Sunday before, right? But here he's saying that what does that have to do with Pesach? It doesn't have to do with Pesach if it's just counting from Sundays. It could be any Sunday of the year, right? So that's our V'oid. Rabbi Yossi gives a second teretz. Nemer Shabbos Lamata. It says Shabbos at the end. It says, but until after Shabbos you count 50 days. Nemer Shabbos Lamaila. It says you count. It says Shabbos. You should count after Shabbos. Day after Shabbos, it says you count Mala Halan. Just like when it says until the seventh week, until the seventh week, you count 50 days. Regel Tchilas Regel, just like over there, it's talking about Shavuos. Afkan Regel Tchilas Regel, so too over here, it's talking about Pesach in the beginning of Pesach. Shavuos only has the beginning, only has 1 day. So here also, it's the beginning of Pesach. It's the second teretz. Now that teretz we also had before. Shabbos Lamaila, Shabbos Lamata. That's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Had it before as well. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, which we think is a student of Reb Meir, according to one opinion. This is an interesting teretz. It says 6 days you should eat matzahs. It also says 7 days you should eat matzahs. Usually we interpret this to mean that just like the seventh day is Rishus, it's not an obligation to eat matzah. If you want to eat bread, it has to be matzah. But otherwise, you can eat potatoes or eggplant or whatever, avocados for
Not from Alter.
not from Al-Tahim, right? What they have over there, more potatoes. Yeah, but even that wasn't from the Al-Tahim. What year
Peru?
did it? What year did they get potatoes? What did they do before potatoes?
What did they do before potatoes?
So, had onions and carrots probably, yeah, cabbage. So we said that 6 days. Usually, this is translated as the 6 days are also only rishus. Right? The only mitzvah of matzah is on the first night. The rest of Pesach, it's not a mitzvah. It's not an obligation. Some say that it's still a mitzvah. Every kazayis yid is still a mitzvah. The Gra says it's a mitzvah. He wants to say a bracha on it also. So Ketzad, but what is it? How does it interpret it here? Matzah shiat yachalech l'shiva min achadash at yachalech shisha min achadash. That there's 6 days where you can't eat, where the 6 days where you can eat it from the new grain, but the seventh day, the first day is from the old grain. The first matzah has to be from the old grain, right? Because the Omer allows the new grain to be eaten. So it's really 6 days that you eat matzah from the new grain. That's what the pasuk is saying. 6 days from the new, which means what day was the Omer brought? The second day of Pesach. So then the brisa goes on. It says, that's a new teretz. We didn't have that before. From the day that you bring the Omer, you count. Yachol yiktzar v'yavi. Maybe you harvest the Omer. Then you bring it to the base of Mikdash. And any time after that, you start to count. Pasuk doesn't say they have to count immediately then. So it says no. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, "Mehachel chermesh bakama tachalisper." When you begin to harvest, the sickle comes to the standing grain, you begin to count. So it's the counting begins from the harvesting. If you count from the harvesting, yachol yiktzer v'yisper. Maybe you harvest the grain and you start counting right away. And and when do you bring it to the base of Mikdash? That whenever you want. But you start, the counting begins from the harvesting. When is the Omer brought? That could be any day afterwards. It says no, on the day that you bring it. That means you don't count before the day you bring it. Maybe the harvest and the counting and the bringing is all by day. All of them should be done on the 16th of Nisan, the day after the first day of Pesach. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, Sheva Shabbos is tamimis tiyana. It needs to be complete. How is it complete if it's in the middle of the day? The counting, right? We don't count. Count only at the beginning of the night to make it a full day. How do you have a full 7 weeks? You have to count at night. So maybe you have to harvest, bring, and count at night. I'll do all of them. It says no, you bring it by day. How was this done? The harvesting and the counting was done at night. And hava b'yayim, but the offering of the grain was brought by day. Okay, so we have the okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, "Kulu islu pircha." All of these explanations, they all have questions. Bar mitarti tanoi basrai, bein b'masnisa kamais, bein masnisa basrai, said leslu pircha. The first brisa and the second brisa, they have 4 answers, which turn out to only be 3 because one of them is overlapping. They don't have any question on them. Those are perfect answers. Now we go through what the problems are. If you remember, Rabbi Yechon Menzake said that I have one pasuk that says 50 days, one pasuk that says 7 weeks. How do you have that? Well, it depends if it's on Shabbos or on Sunday or on during the week. On Shabbos, then it would be you start from Sunday, which would mean full weeks. It says Dilma Kedabaya. Maybe the pshat in Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Yechon Menzake's 2 psukim is the way Abaya learns. Dam Rabaya mitzvah mimna yomim mitzvah mimna shvui. You have to count both the days and the weeks, right? Hayom shiva yomim shehem shvua echad. You have to count. Today is 7 days and 1 week to the Omer. Maybe you have to count both. right? That's the way we do. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai loses his teretz. He was saying that it's two separate mitzvahs. One is if Shavuos is on if Pesach is on Shabbos, then you count full weeks, and if it's on in the middle of the week, then you count days. Yes, a whole different shot, not like a bayim. Imid Rabbi Lazar, if it's from Rabbi Lazar that says that it's the Bezdin has to count. Rabbi Yeshua, that he also says that Shavuos. Rabbi Yeshua said Shavuos is 1 day. No, Rabbi Yeshua said that you can tell when it is. You can look in the sky and see when it is. So if it's Rabbi Lezer or Rabbi Yeshua, then we might be Yom Tov Rishon Kai. How do you know that it's coming from the first day of Pesach? Don't be Yom Tov Achron Kai. Maybe it's from the last day of Pesach. We didn't say anything that it's referring to the first day, right? Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, these other opinions, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, he says less l'pircha. Those are good terutzim. Rabbi Yishmael's teretz was that the Aimer is brought at the beginning of the Stei Alechem is brought at the beginning of the holiday. So to the Aimer is brought at the beginning of the holiday. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, it says Shabbos above and Shabbos below, just like over there, it's the beginning of the holiday. So it's over here, it's the beginning of the holiday. Okay, that's from the first brisa. Midi Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, if we're gonna answer the first answer of the second brisa, where he said that it was that you don't want to end up counting 56 days. He says, Havamina Dilma Chamishan Labar Mianishita. Maybe it would have said, you're not counting 56 days. You ignore the first 6 and you start counting from then. It's still only 50 days. Imid Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, he gave the same teretz as Rebbe Lezer, so we also pushed that off. How do you know that it's the first of the first holiday? Maybe it's the last holiday, right? He said that it was you're counting, the Bezdin's counting, but that's also if it would be the day after the second days of Pesach, right? Later, the 7th day of Pesach, the day after that, it would have been the same teaching. Rabbi Yossi gave 2 answers. He gave the first answer, then he gave a va'id. So Nami Chatzilei Pircha. In his first answer, you also have a question. And that's why he gave a second answer. Now let's take a look at Rabbi Yossi's answers again. Rabbi Yossi said, how do you know which day of which Shabbos is supposed to be? Right? If it's supposed to be, if it means a Sunday, and we don't know anything about Pesach, he says that's not a good teretz. As you see, that he gave us another answer. Do they have a commentary that says why it's not a good teretz? That's something. Okay, I have a note here. Since Rava did not explain this refutation as he did with the other proofs that he rejected, the later commentaries attempt to fill in this gap. Some claim that it can be assumed that the verse serves to clarify an issue rather than to obfuscate. Therefore, one may conclude from the context that the Shabbos mentioned the verse is for the first one that follows the first festival day of Passover, this is a commentary by the Cheshek Shlomo. Yeah. Okay. What? Obfuscate. Okay. So I know the Kamavai, that's why he gave another reason. And what's the other reason? That was the same reason of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, which we said that it's the beginning of the holiday. Shavuos is the beginning of it, so to this is the beginning of the holiday. Okay. Gufa. One of the things we mentioned in passing is Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Mitzvah It's a mitzvah to count the days, it's also a mitzvah to count the weeks. Says Rabbanan debei Ravashi manu yaime manu shvui. That's what the sages in the yeshiva of Ravashi. That's what they did. Ameimar manu yaime v'lei manu shvui. Ameimar only counted the days. He didn't count the weeks. V'amar zeichel mikdashu. He said nowadays the Omer is only derabanan. It's only a rabbinic enactment that we do to commemorate the mikdash, and so you don't have to do it exactly the same way. So that's a problem. Because usually when you derabanan, we're masakin it the way that you do it midiraisa, right? So I see in the notes they have the griz from the Briskerov. He says if they would have been masakin it as a chelik of the mitzvah, that to do the mitzvah sa'im are fine, but they were masakin it as a zecher lemikdash. It's not a zecher of Svir Sa'imer. It's a zecher of the mikdash, and commemorating the mikdash. That you only have to do one thing to commemorate the mikdash. You don't have to do everything. So, the main mitzvah. That's what he says. I guess that's what he means. Okay, a new Mishnah.
Is that a general statement?
That's true. There's this interesting.
Do we see so often Zeker Lamikdash or Zeker whatever? Is that a generalization, what you said? That's very interesting.
I don't think so, because like the other Zeichel Mikdash we have, that we take the lulav all 7 days, we don't see any different, in the way we take it. Take it the same way on. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't have to be yours. Or maybe in the Beis Hamikdash it also didn't need to be yours on all 7 days. Maybe it was always, even in the Beis Hamikdash, it only needed to be yours on the first day. So that would be like the exact same. Pesach matzah marar, right? We do it without the carbon Pesach.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be a proof, because
that's interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
All I say was interesting.
It's true. They cut the omer, they cut the grain, they put it into baskets. They brought it to the azara. Then they would toast it in the fire. By mitzvah's koli, to fulfill the mitzvah of it being toasted. Different Reb Meir, that's Reb Meir's interpretation. Yeah, it's an old-fashioned popcorn that doesn't pop. It just gets toasted. Like that concha corn, that stuff. It doesn't pop. It just like pops inside. You know what I'm talking about? These large corn kernels. It just it stays inside. It doesn't pop open. Just anyway. Chachamim Maimrim, Chacham say bekanim or bekailachis. Chayftim, I say. First, they would beat it. You see, according to Reb Meir, they would toast it while it's still in the husk, it's still in the attached to the stalk. It's no. You would beat it out of the stalk, but you would use these soft sticks so that it shouldn't get crushed. You didn't want to crush it yet, and you just wanted to take the grains out. So typically, the way they would do this was they would put it on the floor, and they would have the animal walk on it. They would put a board on top, and they would thresh it, right? Dash. They're not doing a real dash. They're just banging it with sticks to get it out, and then so they're not crushing the grain. And then nasnu le'ibav, la'abav. Abav is a hollow tube made out of copper, brass. Abav hayamenukav kadeshia or shelit bekulei, and it had holes in it so that the fire should get in. Shatchu ba'azara v'ruach menasheves bay. Then they would spread it out in the courtyard, and the wind would blow on it. Nasnu, I guess, to cool down. Nasnu le'rechaim shel graces. They put it into a bean grinder. What is it? Mill. Okay. Mill. So that it shouldn't get crushed finely. They wanted to crush it thick. And the reason for that is because they still wanted to sift the chaff out of it. If it was ground, finely, then the chaff would get ground together with it, and it wouldn't get sifted the same way. So they just crushed it in a thick. And they took out from that one isaran, which was sifted with 13 sifters. Bashar, what do you do with all the other grain if you're only taking the after 13 sifters? What you left is like on the vodka, it's distilled 5 times, right? What's that? What happens to everything else that's left over? They sell it in the next bottle. Right? Okay, so they put on a new label. Yeah, they would take from 5 sa, they would get three. They would from 5 sa they would get 1 isaran, or maybe from 3 sa they would get 1 isaran. So the 13 sifters they would get redeemed, and anyone could buy it and eat it. Chayiv b'chala. Once they made it into dough, they had to separate challah. That's talking about what they redeemed, not the omer. The omer wasn't chayiv and challah. The flour that got redeemed was left over from the 13 sifters, right? That was chayiv and challah. We put them in a meiser, but you didn't have to take meiser because at the time when this was harvested, it was exempt from meiser because it was already in the temple by the time it was collected, right? Challah today is burnt. Those days it would go to the kohen. But it says it's exempt from Meiser, and Meiser was given to the Levi usually. Rabbi Kiva Machayev b'chala b'Meiser. Rabbi Kiva says no, it's Chayev in Chala and in Meisers. Okay, Taner Rabbanon, it was taught in a brayso. Aviv, it says in the pasuk that you put it in the. It's Aviv. What's the whole pasuk? Let's take a look. I don't have it. The pasuk there. I don't think so. Let's see. Yeah, you're right. 2:14, very good. I scroll. Says here, when you bring the meal offering of your first ripened grains before God, you should bring the first fresh kernels of the barley harvest, parched in fire, coarsely ground, as the meal offering of your first ripening grain. So it says, Minchas bikurim la Hashem. Bring the first fresh kernels. Aviv. What does aviv mean? I guess it means aviv means the first fresh kernels. So it says zehu aviv. Aviv ze aviv. That means the first of the harvest. Kali be'esh. It says it's toasted in fire. That also in the pasuk, yeah. Kali be'esh. Malamichi Yisrael mahavman oisebeish k'dei l'kaim mitzvahs kali. If Reb Meir says that means that they have to toast it. Chachamim aimrim, but the Chachamim say no. Chachamim say ein or lashon kali ala davar acher. Putting it in fire is not going to be kali. You need to be something else. What do you have to do? Haketzat or lishnachrina. Ein lashon kali ala davar kalil. When it says kali, it doesn't mean that it's toasted. It means kalil. It means there has to be something thin between the fire and it. So according to Reb Meir, they were actually toasting it directly over fire. According to the Chachamim, they were putting it into this tube. Okay, how would they do this? Abuv shel kloyas hayasham. They had this tube of people that would sell these toasted things. I guess it would come in a tube, and like the popcorn comes in these like little cones. Okay, so the cone, right? Yeah.
I've seen it. Sometimes they have red lights. They sell these tubes.
Some toasted barley, right? By Yamilka B'Kikvara, it had a holes in it like a sieve. B'Hdr Shaletis B'Kules, that the fire should be able to get inside, and so it was still protected, but it was still, the fire could still get in. Then it says Aviv Kolei Gerish. We're reading the three words together. First grains toasted geres, right? Any idea? I don't know. Imba aviv kalei, im geres kalei. I don't know if it's while it's fresh grains, it's toasted, or after it's ground, it's toasted. Kishwaimer ba'esh hifsik inyan, and it says kalei ba'esh, toasted in fire. It says that separates. That's like a comma in between the words, and therefore it's toasted before it's ground. It's not toasted after. It's toasted flour means that it's toasted. This is toasted grains, not toasted flour. Right? It's the flour from toasted grains. Then it says caramel. Caramel means rach umal. Rach umal means soft and what does mal mean? Uncrushable. Yeah, squishable. You know, that was. It seems like that was possible.
By the way, I mean, some of the best popcorn still can be bought at
And where?
Gula.
Oh, the popcorn.
Oh,
Yeah, those really is good popcorn. Sell big bags of popcorn before Shabbos. Everyone comes home, right? I think my parents are. No. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have that here, and popcorn on for Shabbos. But in Yerushalayim, these big bags. They sell these big bags. Everyone's walking home. All the kids popcorn for Shabbos. You know. Okay. So caramel, it's soft and squishable. It says in the pasuk, "V'ishba mibal shalisha, v'yavei leisha likim lechem bikurim, esrim lechem seirim karbel b'tzikleni v'yer metain la'am v'yechelu." This is by Elisha. A man came from Baal Shalisha. He brought to the prophet this bread, 20 loaves, I guess, and it's caramel. It says caramel. Bitzikleinai. What does bitziklain means in his bag, I guess. We'll see in the Gemara. And it says, give to the people that they could eat. So it says caramel is coming to tell us that caramel meant that it was soft. Okay. Then it says, what's bitziklainai? Now, bitziklainai is called nutrikon, which is a Rashi Tevis. It's coming to tell us a whole bunch of things. In that word, bitziklainai, I translate it as his bag, but I don't know. In their husk. Okay. The first bays of bitziklainai comes to tell me that he came. The yatzak, that's the tzadik kuf of bitziklainai. He poured. Lanu is the lamed. The vav is ve'achalnu, we ate. V'navahaya, and it was good. All of that is in that word, bitziklainai. The Rosh Tevis. The bread was good. Vaimer, if you want to see other types of nutrition, we have another pasuk. This nisalsa be'ahavim. Nisalsa, what meant that they went onto the bed with the lovers. What does it mean? Nasa v'nitin, that means they had a conversation. V'nala, that means they went up to the bed. V'nismach, they rejoiced. V'nischate be'ahavim. Adulterous woman. And v'nischate be'ahavim. What does nischate mean?
family shares.
Oh, v'nischata. How do we get the nun? This is the hay. Oh, the hay is switching for a ches. Nisalsa, the samach was nismach. Nasa v'nitain is the nun in the tuf. Then I have an ayin, that was nala. Then I have the nala lamita, it's supposed to be nala lamita. Then I to the bed. And then I have a nismach is the samach, even though it's a sin, but we transpose it for a samach. Nischata is supposed to be a hey, but it's a ches. Nischata be'ahavim. How do they translate nischata in English?
Family shirt.
Rejoiced.
Oh, be joyful.
That's what the word before that was joyful.
Family shirt, trying to warn everybody.
Be pampered. Translate nischata as be pampered. Several explanations are provided for the word nischata, which appears in two of the examples of shortened terms presented in the Gemara, nitalsa and naalasa. Rashi explains the first use of nischata as a leisurely stroll. Elsewhere, he states that it's an expression of sin. Nischata is a sin. With regard to the second use of nischata, Rashi says it means throwing down. Similar explanation appears in Tosfos. To gently place down. The Aruch apparently translates the word as to be pampered. So he's translating as the Aruch. Okay. If you want another nutrikon, it says knaf rinanim ne'alasa. Knaf rinanim is the wings of a ostrich, maybe. Rinanim. It's a wild bird. Ne'alasa, what does it mean? Ne'alasa means noisei, it carries. That means it carries its young or its eggs. Oila, we're looking at the word ne'alasa, the same like we had before, nisalsa. It goes up. Nischata, that means it places it down gently, I guess. And okay, now we have another one. Another interpretation, but we use one word to open it up to be a Rosh Tevis, ki yarat haderech lenegdi. Because the path turned for me. What does it mean, turned? What does it mean, yarat? Yarasa, it was afraid of the angel that it saw. Rasa, it saw the angel in the middle of the road, and Natsa, and therefore it turned off the road. Yeah, that Yarat is an acronym. Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, we go back to Bei Rabbi Shmuel, Carmel, which he said before meant that it was Rachmal. He says Carmale. It means that it's a full husk. That means that it was fully ripened. That's how Rabbi Shmuel interprets it. Okay. Well, now we have a new Gemara. Let's see if we can do this. We change gears now. This is we're now riding uphill. It's a little more halachic. Rabbi Kiva Mechaya B'chalav Ma'asros. We said that when you redeem that grain that was left over, it says Rabbi Kiva says that you have to take challah and you also have to take ma'aser. Amar Rav Kana. Kana says Imahir Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva would say miruach. Miruach means to smooth off the top of the silo. When you after you harvested all the grain, you would put it into a silo, and then you would smooth off the top, and then you would put the cover on or something, and that would be the when it would be chayev in meiser. Once you completed the process, then you have to take meiser. Anything before that was considered achilas arai, just eating it temporary. You're allowed to go into the field and just plop some grains in your mouth. You didn't have to take meiser. It was only when you brought it, either brought it into the house or you harvested it in a way where it was finished the process that you'd be chayev. He says miruach hektish eine paiter. If the final act was done by the Beis Hamikdash, so then it's not pater. We were saying before that it is pater because it was done in the Beis Hamikdash, right? The all of this, but here Rabbi Kiva holds not like that. That's why Rabbi Kiva holds that even though this was redeemed from the Beis Hamikdash, this grain, but it's still chayiv and meiser. Masav Rav Sheshes has a question on Rav Kana. Meiser Shalish Saim Halalu, what did they do with the leftover of the 3 sa? Because they would only use 1 isarin. The nifta v'nechal l'chaladam v'chayiv b'chala patim min ha'maisers. It says that you would redeem it, and that anyone could eat it. It's chayiv and chala. That means after you make the dough, you have to give a piece to the kayin, 1/24th or 1/48th, depending on if it's a baker or a homeowner. And it's pater, it's exempt from meiser. Rabbi Kiva machai b'chal meiser. Rabbi Kiva says no, you have to take meiser as well. Amrulai, the Chum said to Rabbi Kiva, apaida miad gizbar yechiach. When someone redeems from a gizbar, that should prove that you don't have to take meiser. Whenever you redeem anything from the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash, you don't have to take meiser. V'misa, and if it would be like the way Rav Kana says, the miruach hekdesh ein apaita, that just because it was the final process was done by the Beis Hamikdash, it doesn't exempt it. It's still chayiv. My kamrilay. So what was Rabbi Akiva? What was the Chachamim telling Rabbi Akiva? It says he would argue on that as well. Yeah, Rabbi Akiva would. The proof that the Chachamim brought against Rabbi Akiva is he said, so why does every time you redeem from hekdesh, why come you don't have to take meiser? It sounds like Rabbi Akiva agrees that every time you don't. If the explanation is that it's across the board, Rabbi Akiva always hold that miruach hekdesh is chayiv in meiser, then how the Chachamim tell Rabbi Akiva, I'll show you a case where you're proven wrong. Well, he argues on that case as well. Oh, one second. Void. Esvei Rav Kana bar Tachlifal Rav Kana bar Matisya. Okay. There's another question. It says, Midatanya Rabbi Akiva Mechayev Bechala B'Maisers Levish Nitnu Mois Ela L'Tzerich Lahen. It says like this. Rabbi Akiva says that what's left over from the Meiser, what's left over from the Omer, is still chayev in chala and in Meiser. Chala there's no argument on, but in Meiser he's arguing. He says the explanation is because that was never kodesh. They only consecrated the parts that would end up being used. So they only consecrated whatever is going to end up in the for the carbon. So it's a kasha on Rav Kana. Rav Kana said that what's the reason why it's chayev and why it's going to be chayev in mais, because he holds that miruach hekdesh is still chayev. It doesn't have to do with miruach hekdesh. It has to do with never consecrated. Elam Rabbi Yechanan says Talmud Aruch Befiv Shel Rabbi Akiva. We have a clear teaching from the mouth of Rabbi Akiva that shleinit the mais al tzerich len, that because the reason why it's chayev in meiser is because the money was only given, the grain was only given for what was going to be used. Yeah. Let's go a drop further. Amar Rava says, Pshitali de Mirach Hekdesh Paiter. Says, to me it's obvious that if the Beis Hamikdash does the Miruach, does the final part, it's going to be exempt from Meiser. Vafilu Rabbi Akiva like a Machayev Asam. Why did Rabbi Akiva say that Yechayev, even though if it's Miruach Hekdesh it's Pater, why did Rabbi Akiva say Chayev, that you're obligated to take Meiser? Ella Shleinit the Meiser al Tzerich, because it was never consecrated. It was only consecrated the amount that was going to be used. Avi Miruach Hekdesh Ba'alma Paiter. But Rabbi Akiva would agree that if this was harvested by Hekdesh and then was put into the silo by Hekdesh, and Hekdesh did that, it would be exempt from Meiser. Rava continues, he says, just like Miruach Hekdesh is Pater, Miruach Ovid Kechavim that's going to be a Machlekes. Tanoihi. The Tanya was done in a Brisa. Tarmin Mishel Yisrael al Yisrael Yisrael. You can take Truma from grain that a Jew grew and other grain that a Jew grew. And you can take Truma from a grain that a non-Jew grew and another grain that a non-Jew grew. Mishal Kutim al Shal Kutim. And if a Kuti grew it, and also from grain that a Kuti grew. Mishal Kol al Shal Kol. And also you can mix them, a Jew and a non-Jew why? Because when a non-Jew grows the grain and finishes it off, it's not exempt just because he did the the smoothing off the top of the silo, that doesn't make it exempt. Divrei Meir Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Rabbi Yehuda holds. However, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Imrim, we have 4 of Rabbi Kiva's students here. We're missing Rabbi Loza. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon say, Tarmin Mishal Yisrael, I agree with you that a Jewish grain on Jewish grain you could do. Mishal al Shalkutim. And Ovid Kechavim on Ovid Kechavim also. And also Kutim. Mishal Kutim al Ovid Kechavim. And from a Kuti on Ovid Kechavim or other Kutim. Avalei Mishal Yisrael al Ovid Kechavim Mishal Kutim. But you can't take Truma from Jewish grain on non-Jewish grain. And you can't take non-Jewish grain Truma on grain that was grown by a Jew. Because they hold that if the non-Jew smoothed off the silo, that it's going to be exempt. It's called Menachiv ala Potter. What's chayev, you're taking Truma from what's chayev on something that's actually exempt. It doesn't work. So now he says Gilgul. This means the kneading of the dough. We're on top of Samach Zayin. Gilgul hektish paiter. If the dough was kneaded by hektish, then it's exempt. Even if a Jew redeems it after, you don't have to take challah. It's not because we have a Mishnah. It says hektisha isasa achle gilgula. If a woman consecrated her dough before she kneaded it, so it became holy. Upadata, and then she decides to redeem it. It says chayeves. I'm sorry, I didn't read that right. Hektisha isasa achle gilgula. Before it was dough, chayeves. Imachle gilgula upadata. She redeemed it before she consecrated and redeemed it also before it was made into dough. Then it's going to be chayiv, because when did she make it into dough? After she redeemed it. Misha gilgala, if she consecrated after it was dough, padata, and then she redeemed it, it's also chayavis. But however, the one case where it's going to be different is iktisha shle gilgala, the gilgala gizbar vacha padata. If it was kneaded into dough by the temple treasurer, and then it was redeemed, then it's petura. Shas chivasa haisa petura. At the time when it was redeemed, and when time was needed, it was exempt. Okay, boy Rava. Rava has a question.
Bless you. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Gilgal, Ovid Kechavim Mai. What's going to be if the kneading of the dough was done by a non-Jew? Mishnah Tanan. He explains what's going to be the din. He explains why he has a question. Mishnah says, we have a Mishnah that says, Gershin Eskaya V'Haisala Yisa. If a person converts, and when he converted, he had dough that was sitting there, was ready to bake, but it was already dough. Nasa Ajshle Neskaya Potter. If it was made into dough before the conversion, he dips in the mikveh, he comes out, and he has this dough there. So it's potter from challah, because it was already kneaded before he was Jewish. Mishinis gayer, but if it became dough after he went into the mikveh, then it's chayev, because when he was Jewish, he made the dough. Suffolk, if there was a doubt when it turned into when it was, I guess he goes into the mikveh and someone else pours the water in, right? So then it's going to be chayev misafik. Haman katanila. Which Tana would have taught this? That a suffix is going to be chayev. Divrei Kolhi. Do we say this Divrei Kol? Vafilu Ramei Rabbi Yehuda Mechavi Hasam. Do we say that even Ramei and Rabbi Yehuda that say over there like hektish? Ramei and Rabbi Yehuda that said by hektish. No, I'm sorry, not by hektish. They said by a non-Jew. They said that you can take truma from one on the other. A Jew and a non-Jew, right? What would they say here? They would say, I feel that over there they said chayev, but pachi hacha. The hasam who diksiv the gancha. Excuse me. Over there, when it came to the Truma and Meiser. Over there it says the Gancha Yasera. It says twice the Gancha, your grain. So Avimiyat Achamiyat, Vein Miyach and Achamiyat, Al Rabbis. Because it says the Gancha, your grain, and then it says again your grain. So why does it have to say it twice? That's a excluding other people, and then it excludes other people again. So when I have a double exclusion, that's coming to actually include. If that's the case, that's including non-Jewish people. Afilu oivdei kechavim are going to be chayiv and meiser. Aval hacha, but when regarding chala, zimni arisasechem ksiv, it says twice arisasechem, chad arisasechem k'dei saschem. But arisasechem means your dough. One time when it says arisasechem, it's coming to tell you that it needs to be the right amount of your dough. The chad arisasechem v'lo yisas oivdei kechavim, v'lo yisas hektish. The other one is coming to tell me an exclusion, not the dough of a non-Jew and not the dough of hektish. We could say that then, which would mean that even Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda that said that a non-Jew is chayev and meiser, he would agree that he's pater from chala. Oy Dilma, or maybe we should learn it differently. Maybe the one that said that Mishnah that said that there's a difference between when he converted, if it's chayev and chala, and the doubt. It says that's really Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon Ketanil. The Kapatri, they said before that a non-Jew is exempt. Aval Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda. But according to Reb, where did they say that? By Meiser, not by Chala. But maybe it's their same opinion. Aval Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda, but really Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda, Gamri Reishis Mihasim, they would learn that it's actually going to be Chayev and Chala. So he doesn't know the answer to who's the author of this Mishnah that exempts a non-Jew's dough from Chala. Amar Rava says, Yehi Rava dachsei b'chelma. It should be the will of Hashem that I should be able to get an answer in a dream. I never saw this before. We have other Gemaras where they want to see it in a dream. Maybe Dr. Stein, do you know about this? Maybe the Gemara Brachas, maybe with the. What do you have in Rabbeinu Gershon? What does he say? 1 second. What do you say? Just 1 second. No. No. That's just explain. Rabbeinu Gershon just explains the question. Does everyone agree to this Mishnah, or is it not? That's what Rabbeinu Gershon. Okay. Now the Gemara says that it should be the will of Hashem that I should see it in a dream. Hadar Amarava, Rabba then says, Manda Mirochevet Kampata, the one that says that Mirochevet Kavim is exempt from Meiser, that's Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. Gilgal Evit Kavim is also Pater. Okay. Another Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Shimon would say this Mishnah. Manda Mirochevet Kavim Meina Pater, according to Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Gilgal Evit Kavim Meina Pater, so he would not say this Mishnah. So it's according to the second version that Rabba had. Okay, how do you get that answer? Because he got it from a dream. It doesn't tell us. Maybe he got it clear. Rav Papa is a student of Rabbi. He asks him the following question. Oived kechavim, that he separates, he designates a lamb to redeem a firstborn donkey. Yeah? Why is he doing that? He's not Jewish. He's going to convert. That's why. The challah, or he separates challah from his dough while he's not Jewish. Then they tell him that, by the way, you didn't have to do that. You're not Jewish. It's perfectly fine. So the chalasai nechelas lezarim upetach amar geizes vayvet bay. So the challah could be eaten by anyone because it's not real challah. He wasn't Jewish. And the petach hamar, it's regular lamb. The lamb was supposed to be exchanged for the firstborn, but there's nothing special about it. It wasn't consecrated. Ha trumasai, but if he would have taken truma, asura, that would have been asur. That's where medayak. That's what it's implied from this. It says Vaha Hai Tana Dama Mirchav Chamina Pater Vigilgal Mecham Pater. So 1 second. You just told me that the same opinion that holds that Truma and Meiser is Pater also holds Chal is Pater. That was Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. The same opinion that holds that it's Chayiv. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda holds that Chal is Chayiv. But over here you said that the Chala is Pater and Truma is going to be Chayiv. That means Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon that hold Trumas Chayiv hold that Chalas Pater, which is exactly the opposite of the way Rava answered his question. So that's Rav Papa's question to Rava. Based on this, yeah? Ravina has a question for Rava. It says, Chalas Evid Kichavim Ba'aretz. If someone, a non-Jew, separates Chala that grew in Israel, Utrumasai B'chutz La'aretz, or he separates Truma from grain that grew in Chutz La'aretz. Medina Yishu Pater, we say that he's exempt. We say that the chala is nothing, could be eaten by a non-Kohen, it's not chala. And the truma, if it gets mixed into other grain, won't make dimua, it won't make a forbidden mixture. It's going to be, there's nothing holy about it. But let's say the truma was in Eretz Yisrael, asura medamas, then it would be asur. That's pretty clear. There's truma only in Chutz La'aretz, the non-Jews truma. But if it would be in Eretz Yisrael, then it would be holy, which means that a non-Jewish grain is considered consecrated. It would be still considered obligated in Truma, in Meiser. But this one that holds that it's not Pater, which is Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, Pater, but he holds that Kala is Pater, which is not the way Rava answered this question. Gemara answers Midrabanan. Really, let's see what this means. Really, the grain is pater from Truma, even in Eretz Yisrael. Trumas and Meises, it's pater. But Midrabanan, we said that it's chayiv. Gezer mishum balakisim. Balakisim means rich people. What they would do is if we allowed the grain to be exempt, so they would sell it to a non-Jew, and they would exempt themselves from the Meiser, similar to the way we sell chametz, right? They would sell it, and they would get out of it, and then this. So we said that even if a non-Jew owns it, it's still going to be chayav. Midrabanan. Tax evasion, right? The Gemara says, "Yihachi afilu chala nami." So chala should also be chayav, because we should make a decree that maybe they're going to sell their dough to a non-Jew, be exempt. What was that joke where they sell their stomachs on Yom Kippur or something? Anyway, after the afila, paches mechameshes revayim kemach vayid. It's totally not necessary to sell it to a non-Jew. We didn't have to make a decree on that, because if they wanted, they could have made smaller batches if they wanted to exempt themselves. Less than 5/4 of a kav kemach, and then would have been exempt. So Trumanami, after David la Kid Rabbi Ishia, the Truma, they also could have done another way out. They could have done what Rabbi Ishia says. The Rabbi Ishia marim adam al tuvasa. A person could do a trick to exempt himself from from being obligated to take the Trumas and Meisers. What do? Machnisa b'maitshela. You bring it into the house while it still has the chaff on it. So that way he's going to be exempt from taking Meiser, because it's still animal food, right? Inami. The ayala derech gagas derech hafifas, or he could take it through the roofs. It says it's only chayiv if you take it through the doorway. That's to see the Pesach Habayis. So there's other ways out. And nevertheless, we still made a decree that he's going to sell it to a non-Jew. Even though if he wanted, he could have done it in other ways. It says, Hasim b'far hesya v'zila be'mos. Over there, when you do something like that, everyone knows, everyone sees what you're doing. You're bringing in all the grain, then take it off the chaff off. Everyone sees that you're tricking the system. When it comes to baking dough, bitzina, this is done in quiet and no one sees. So therefore, we didn't make it. We didn't make a decree here, because if he wanted to get out of taking challah, he had other ways of doing it. Okay, let's stop at this Mishnah. What's that?
Thank you.
during Shemitah. A good week. Shabbat Tov. What would they do by Shemitah?
They wouldn't harvest, they would see it, you know?
And then what would happen?
They do it. That's what they wouldn't- that's- harvest.
No, over here, we're making a special decree that if you sell it to a non-Jew, it's still going to be chayav rabbinically. So why don't we do that by everything? So by challah as well. If you sell it to a non-Jew, it still should be rabbinically chayav. He said if he didn't want it to take the challah, he had another way out. He could have made smaller batches, and then it's not chayav and challah. By the other ones, everyone would see if you're trying to get a way out. The only way out to trick everyone would be to sell it to a non-Jew. So that trick, we took away that trick by making it chayav anyway. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's everyone.